Okay, so now on, we'll be taking a look at deploying the application on Kubernetes. To begin with, the first thing that we need to take care of is start the application, and it should run on a actuator URL. That is this. So let's say I'll be considering an example of the scheduler service. That is the first service I'll be deploying on Kubernetes. And before we deploy anything, there are certain things that needs to be taken care of. So first things first, I need to access the URL. So this is the URL that I'll be using, or you can have the health check, but I prefer the actuator. Okay, then once this is done, if we take a look at the YAML file, it has the server and the sublet context path along with the port number. Then we have threads, virtual threads, application, the data source, connection to the database, SQL database, a Hazelcast server information, and then we have the management plugin. Now, one thing we need to put is Spring profile. So in order to do that, I have to put under Spring, I need to put config activate on profile dev. What does this do is that it will have another profile as a dev, so you can have dev, prod, UAT, so on. And then let me start the application as a dev profile. In order to start the application, I need to specify in the configuration that this start this application using the dev profile. So I go to the configuration modify option and specify the add VM options, and then within this I would use -d spring profile dot spring dot profile dot active equal to dev, and apply and run this. Okay, I need to check the configuration. So it is spring profiles dot active. Okay, so this picks up a profile dev, and accordingly it will start the application for us. Okay, this is done. Okay, let me check at least the application is running. Okay, the URL of actuator is accessible. Now what we need to do is copy the same and create a default profile within the same file. So earlier it used to use a different files for different profiles. So if you have multiple profiles like UAD dev prod, it used to have various files within it like application -dev, application UAT, application -prod. But here in this case of Spring Boot 3, they have provided the configuration to be part of a single YAML file like this, and I'll just remove this so that it will have a default. It will run with the default configuration. So it says no profile set, falling back to default, and it will be using this one. All right. I'll put the configuration back again. This is done. Now we need to go to our pom.xml, and here we need to put build plugins. Now, the reason we are putting a build plugin is to generate a Maven jar out of it. And there are certain plugins that I'll be using. One is the Lombok, the other is for Mapstruct, and other is JIB. Now, the JIB I'll be using is to create a Docker image and send it to the Docker Hub. Now, let me copy certain build plugins from my existing project, and I'll just put it in here. Okay, so this is the build plugin that I'll be using, and it has the Maven build plugin along with a mapstruct processor, so that it will build the mappers in our project along with the Lombok, and there has to be a Lombok and mapstruct binding. The reason is that we are using a Lombok along with the mappers, so there is a plugin called Lombok mapstruct binding to be used in order to make both of them work together. And then we have to use, okay, this is the Spring Boot plugin. Again, Lombok has to be excluded in this case. And then we have the JIB plugin. So JIB plugin is responsible for converting our project into a Docker image. And in fact, it converts the jar that is being built by the Maven into a Docker image and pushes it to the Docker Hub. And in order to push to the Docker Hub, we have to specify certain things, right? So this is the location that this is the location of the Docker Hub. The Docker username, I will be putting it as a test in the property file. So let me do that first. I'll tell you the reason why this is required. We go over here and put that in the properties as a test. So this is just a dummy variable to fill this up, and we'll be using, or we'll be passing that when we do a Maven build. And we have this project ID along with the version and also a latest version. And I've specified certain Java JVM flags. So initial RAM would be 20%, and the maximum RAM that it will be using within the Docker container will be 90%. So let's say if I specify that the Docker container should run with 100 MB of RAM, it will use 90 MB of RAM up to max, so that the 10 MB would be left for the operating system or the Linux within the container, and it should start with a 20% of the RAM. And yeah, that's it. And also one more thing, if you go to your folder in your user folder, there will be an M2 folder which is responsible for storing all your repository, all your jar files that you have downloaded using the Maven. There is also a settings.xml. Now settings.xml is responsible for storing all your information regarding the Docker Hub. Now if we take a look at the settings.xml, it will have certain information which is confidential, and it will hold a link to the Docker Hub, your Docker Hub username and your Docker Hub password. You need to feed that over here. Okay. Build the project using Maven and JIB. It will build a Docker image and push it to the Docker Hub. So I'll show you how that works. Okay. So if we go into our folder and run, so this is a scheduler service that I'll be taking as an example. So what I'll be doing is mvn clean install -d docker dot username is equal to my username and JIB build. So the docker dot username that we have specified in our POM is where the entry for that will be filled from here. Okay, so hence we are specifying the docker dot username as my username, and that will be going to the JIB plugin that we have put into the Maven or into the pom.xml. So let me just run this. So what it'll do is it'll build the jar file and it'll push it, create a Docker image, and it will push it to the Docker hub. So right now, see, it is building the Docker image and along with certain entry points that we have specified. And then it will push it to the Docker hub. Once this is done, we'll be able to access this image in our Kubernetes. And this might take some time. Meanwhile, if I go into the scheduler service, so since we have specified two profiles, the first one is the default one that I'll be using for the purpose of Kubernetes. So these all things will be replaced by dynamic variables that will be passed via the config map in the Kubernetes. And let me check if that push is done. Oh, I'm still doing it. Anyways, so since this is a fresh build, it will obviously take time. And we can wrap up this video here. The rest we can take a look at in the other videos. Thanks.